Tessa always said she wanted something real, something deep. But what she craved, what she truly desired, was mystery. The type that dances just out of reach, that never fully answers the questions you whisper to it at night. She used to lean into Alex's chest and tell him she loved how solid he was. "You ground me," she'd say. But even as she spoke the words, her eyes drifted elsewhere, to the edge of something more exciting, more dangerous. At first, Alex didn't mind. He liked that she was curious, that her mind never stayed still. He admired her spark, how she'd light up talking about unsolved murders, foreign cities she'd never been to, or why people lie even when they don't need to. Tessa was intoxicating, always chasing the next thrill. And in the early days, that thrill included him. But even the most patient heart grows tired of being second to fantasy. Tessa's restlessness started small, a look out the window that lingered too long, a question about an old flame that felt more like a test than a curiosity. "Don't you ever wonder what if?" she asked once, tracing the rim of her wineglass with a manicured finger. Alex had shaken his head, calm and sure. "No, I know what I have." And that was the first time she seemed disappointed. She never wanted lies, not really. She wanted uncertainty. The space between what's said and what's meant. The tension of maybe. A relationship full of locked doors and long hallways where she could roam freely and wonder what waited at the end of each corridor. Alex, on the other hand, was all open doors and warm lamplight. He showed up. He stayed. He loved without riddles. And at some point, that became the very thing Tessa recoiled from. She began to pull away in subtle ways, canceling dinner for a last-minute creative thing with new people he'd never heard of. Coming home late, perfume a little too strong, claiming it was just a new scent. Asking Alex about obscure books and mysterious people just to see if he could match her fascination. But he didn't play. He didn't perform. Because love to Alex wasn't a stage. It was a home. Still, he watched as Tessa grew more obsessed with the chase, the excitement, the not knowing. She started seeking what she couldn't grasp. Drama, unpredictability, someone that wasn't so steady, so present. She mistook stillness for boredom, honesty for dullness. What she didn't realize was that mystery isn't always about what's hidden. It's about what walks away without a trace. And Alex had begun to understand that she was no longer reaching for him. She was reaching past him, into some undefined space she thought held all the answers. He was just another page in her story. Predictable, readable. But mystery, he'd learned, isn't about hiding. Sometimes it's about disappearing. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about the slow erosion of love. It's silent. It creeps in through the tiniest cracks and takes root in the unspoken. Tessa became a stranger in familiar clothes. Where once she found comfort in Alex's steadiness, she now seemed unsettled by it. His consistency, which she used to praise, began to wear on her. "You never change," she said once, tossing the words like a careless accusation. It was during breakfast, over coffee and toast, the same way they always began their mornings. But there was something in her tone, something brittle, tired. Alex raised his eyes and studied her. She didn't meet his gaze. She was looking out the window again. At first he tried to ignore the signs. People go through phases, after all. He chalked it up to stress, the pressure of her job, or maybe just a need for space. He'd always believed in giving her room to breathe. He didn't believe in smothering someone into love. But slowly, subtly, the gap between them widened. She became more impatient, her touch more infrequent. Conversations that used to run long into the night now stalled after a few short exchanges. She scrolled through her phone. During dinner, nodded absently when he spoke, her eyes distant. Sometimes he caught her staring off into nothing, and when he asked what she was thinking, she'd shrug and say, "Nothing really." But he knew that wasn't true. She wasn't with him. Not fully. Then came the questions. Odd ones. Do you think people are meant to stay with one person forever? Or, What if there's something more out there? They weren't framed as criticisms, but Alex could read between the lines. Tessa was probing, searching for validation for a feeling she couldn't name yet. Her restlessness had grown roots, and now it was feeding off her daydreams. Alex tried to bring her back with patience and kindness. He suggested trips, just the two of them. He cooked her favorite meals, showed up at her workplace with flowers, sent her music he thought she'd love. But each gesture landed softer than the last, as if it missed her entirely. Tessa smiled sometimes, but not with her eyes, not with her soul. The woman who once lit up at his attention now looked tired of it. It wasn't another man. Alex didn't suspect infidelity, not in the physical sense. Tessa wasn't chasing someone else. She was chasing a feeling, one she believed she'd lost. The problem was, she thought she needed mystery to find it again. And Alex, with all his quiet love and open honesty, didn't fit that mold anymore. He had become too familiar, too known. That's when the friction began. It started small, like pebbles against glass. Tessa began to manufacture tension, arguing over nothing. How he folded laundry, the music he played in the car, the way he always asked if she was okay when she fell silent. She accused him of being too predictable, too stable. "Do you ever just want to feel alive?" she asked once, exasperated, like something might happen. Alex stared at her then, not with anger but with sorrow. "I always feel alive when I'm with you," he said quietly. But she didn't hear it, not really. She was already drifting, already pulling away. He noticed the difference in her energy when she spoke to others. Friends, co-workers, even strangers. They got the curiosity, the questions, the laughter. Alex got what was left. The echo of someone he used to know. The intimacy between them had dulled. Not from lack of affection, but from lack of presence. She wasn't there when she touched him. Her kiss tasted like obligation, not desire. And when she pulled away, she left a cold draft behind. Still, he held on longer than he should have. Love does that. It convinces you to stay, to fight, to believe that what once was might still be again. But every attempt to bridge the distance only made the distance clearer. Tessa didn't want to be caught, she wanted to chase. And Alex, for all his patience and depth, had grown weary of being a puzzle she wanted to scramble just to solve again. He began to understand something hard but vital. You can't be exciting enough for someone addicted to uncertainty. You can't anchor someone who's convinced that stillness is a trap. Tessa wasn't leaving because Alex lacked something. She was leaving because she needed to believe there was something else. Something undefined. A whisper in the dark that kept calling her away. And Alex, he was done whispering. There comes a moment, quiet and unceremonious, when a person finally lets go. Not with anger, not even with sadness, but with clarity. For Alex, that moment arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Tessa had left in a hurry that morning, late for something vague. Her goodbye was distracted, a kiss missed his cheek entirely. She didn't notice. He stood in the doorway watching her walk to the car, head tilted back to keep her hair from getting wet, her face turned toward the clouds, like they were whispering secrets only she could hear. And just like that, she was gone, leaving nothing behind but the scent of her perfume hanging in the air. An aroma that once brought comfort now seemed to mock him. Alex stood there, longer than he meant to, rain soaking through the cuffs of his sweater. He didn't mind. He was listening, not for her footsteps, but for the silence inside him. For the first time in months, he wasn't angry or anxious. He wasn't questioning himself. He wasn't even waiting for her to come back. He was just done. Not the dramatic kind of done people throw out during a fight. Not the hollow ultimatums used to provoke guilt or grab attention. This was the real thing. The kind of done that roots itself deep and grows quietly until one day it stands fully formed, undeniable. A decision made not in the heat of the moment, but in the exhaustion that follows 100 small heartbreaks. Tessa hadn't cheated, not physically, but she had eroded them. She had chipped away at their bond with every eye roll, every impatient sigh, every conversation she started with half her heart already somewhere else. She'd been gone long before she packed her bags, emotionally, spiritually, even energetically. And for a while, Alex had followed her into that void, hoping he could be enough mystery to keep her attention. He couldn't. And he realized finally he shouldn't have to. So he sat down and made a plan. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. There was no grand revenge, no dramatic confrontation, just a slow, intentional withdrawal. He began to remove himself, little by little, like a ghost unhooking from a haunted house. It started with the physical. Things packed away, digital traces erased. He deleted old photos not out of malice, but because they no longer represented a reality worth clinging to. He canceled joint subscriptions, moved his personal accounts to private ones, began quietly researching places to go. His decision wasn't about escape. It was about reclaiming his peace. Over the next few days, Alex started living as though he were already gone. He'd go for long walks without telling her where he was going. He cooked for himself and only himself, stopped waiting for her to get home before starting dinner. When she spoke, he listened, but he no longer reached into her words, looking for some hidden meaning or desperate clue to pull her back to him. He stopped hoping she'd return to the woman she once was. And Tessa noticed, though not in the way he might have expected. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry or ask what was wrong. Instead, she seemed intrigued. Confused, perhaps. He wasn't reacting the way she was used to. He wasn't chasing, wasn't pleading. There was no anger, no accusations. Just presence, calm and detached. It unnerved her. She asked him one night, half joking, "You've been quiet lately, mysterious even." She smiled like the word itself turned her on. He just looked at her, not coldly, but with a sort of gentle pity. She didn't realize it, but she had finally gotten what she wanted. Mystery. Only now she didn't know how to handle it. Alex wasn't trying to be mysterious. He was becoming absent. A shadow. Something once whole, now untethered. He left on a Thursday. Not at night, not in the middle of some argument, but in the morning. While she was in the shower, he walked out with a duffel bag, a letter folded in thirds, and the weight of finality resting lightly on his shoulders. The letter was short. "Tessa, you always said you wanted mystery. Something you couldn't figure out. Something that kept you guessing. I tried to give you stability. I thought love was enough. I see now it wasn't what you needed. So here it is. The mystery you wanted. No forwarding address, no answers, no closure, just space. Take care of yourself. Alex." He didn't look back, didn't check his phone, didn't wait for her to come running out the door. He knew she wouldn't. She'd stare at the note. She'd probably try to call him. Maybe even show up at his old job. But he had made sure there was nothing to trace. No friends in common left to question. No loose ends. He hadn't vanished out of cruelty. He had vanished because he'd already been disappearing in her world for months, and now he simply finished the job. As the bus carried him out of the city, he stared out the window. The streets blurred into lines of color, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the kind of peace that doesn't come from being understood, but from no longer needing to be. He had once been the open book she refused to read. Now, he was the one story she'd never get to finish. At first, Tessa didn't notice the difference. She assumed Alex was giving her space again, something he'd always done when the air between them grew too tense to breathe. But this time, the silence didn't bend toward her. It didn't stretch itself out in patience, waiting for her to come back around. It simply remained. Unmoving, final. When she stepped out of the shower that Thursday morning, her skin still damp and fragrant with lavender soap, she expected to find him in the kitchen, making his usual slow cup of coffee. Instead, there was only stillness. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that carried weight. She walked from room to room, confusion growing like a chill creeping up her spine. His shoes were gone. His keys were missing. So was the duffel bag they used for weekend trips. Then she saw the note. She read it 3 times, once quickly in panic, a second time in disbelief, and the third time slowly, as the full meaning set in. He was gone. Not angry, not spiteful, just gone. The finality in the note wasn't theatrical. It was devastating because it lacked drama. It didn't beg or blame. It simply stated the truth. Alex had left the stage and the curtain had closed without warning. At first, Tessa didn't react. She went through her day like a machine, pretending everything was normal. She went to work, answered emails, even smiled at coworkers. But the silence followed her like a phantom. When she came home that evening and turned the key in the door, the absence inside the apartment wrapped itself around her like fog. For a while, she told herself this was temporary, that Alex needed time, maybe a few days to cool down. She sent him a few texts, short ones, cautious in tone. "Hey, can we talk?" Then, "I got your note, please call me." And finally, "I didn't know things were that bad. I'm sorry." But the messages remained unread. No bubbles appeared. No ellipses danced on the screen to suggest he was typing. Just silence. It didn't take long for panic to bloom. Tessa began reaching out to mutual friends, only to discover they hadn't heard from Alex either. A few were polite, others distant. Some didn't answer at all. It was clear almost immediately that he had chosen to vanish not only from her life, but from the circles that once connected them. Social media? Nothing. His accounts were either deleted or wiped clean. Email? No reply. She even called his old workplace, only to be told that he'd resigned weeks ago, with no forwarding contact. That was when it hit her. She hadn't been paying attention. He had been preparing to disappear long before he actually left. The signs were all there. The reduced conversations, the distant look in his eyes, the subtle withdrawals from routines and shared plans. But she had been too busy scanning the horizon for something more to realize the most solid thing in her life was quietly slipping through her fingers. She tried to move on, but the absence became a presence of its own. In the mornings, she'd reach out for her phone expecting a good morning text. In the evenings, she'd catch herself cooking for two. Even sleep became haunted. The shape of his body beside her in bed had become muscle memory, and now the empty space was impossible to ignore. And it wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, existential. Alex had always been steady, easy to count on. And for so long, she mistook that for simplicity. She had craved mystery, and now she had it. A man gone without explanation, without a clear destination, without giving her the closure she thought she was entitled to. The irony was cruel. She had pursued the unknown for so long, only to find herself lost in it, abandoned in the fog she once romanticized. She started dreaming about him. Sometimes faint, surreal images, other times vivid recollections of shared moments. The way his hand would brush hers when passing the salt. How he'd laugh softly at the documentaries she made fun of, but always watched with him anyway. His favorite worn t-shirt that smelled of cedar and old pages. She remembered everything now. She tried to fill the void, reconnecting with old friends, going on dates, even trying to get lost in the same kind of chaotic excitement she once chased. But none of it worked. The thrill felt shallow, the conversations hollow. Nothing compared to the deep, still love Alex had offered her, the kind of love she had dismissed as too safe, too predictable. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. And still no sign of him. He became a shadow in her mind, a whisper of a man who once stood beside her and offered her everything. And now he was everywhere and nowhere all at once. She walked through life with the ache of his absence, stitched into her every day. Because mystery, she finally understood, isn't always about what's hidden. It's about what's gone. And Alex had become exactly that. Gone, not just in body, but in essence. A ghost of her own making. A shadow she could never chase down. She had wanted mystery, and now she had it. A perfect silence, a vanishing act, an echo that would never answer back. There's a peculiar kind of grief that doesn't come with funerals or eulogies. It doesn't arrive with casseroles and condolences. It comes quietly, in the slow realization that someone is gone, and they chose not to tell the world. They just disappeared. From your life, from your future, from the version of yourself that only existed with them. That was the grief Tessa now lived with. In the weeks that followed Alex's disappearance, she moved through life as if underwater. Everything sounded muffled. Everything felt delayed, like her emotions were buffering. She still worked, still smiled when it was required. But her spark, the same one that once demanded thrill and unpredictability, had dimmed. The chase had ended not with a revelation or climax, but with absence. She had reached the end of the mystery, only to discover that it had no answer. Just silence. She found herself replaying old conversations, sifting through them like evidence, hoping to find the moment he truly decided to leave. But there was no dramatic pivot. Just 100 tiny moments she hadn't noticed. The pauses between words. The tired way he said, "I'm fine." The way he had stopped asking her where she was going at night. He had been letting go long before he walked out the door. And she had been too busy seeking the unknown to notice the depth unraveling right in front of her. Sometimes she'd sit in their old living room, now hers alone, and stare at the spot on the bookshelf where he kept his favorite dog-eared novels. The shelf was empty now, but she still reached for the air, out of habit. That was the cruelest part of it all. The muscle memory. Her body remembered him in ways her mind tried not to. Every time she cooked, she caught herself setting out 2 plates. Every time she heard a door creak, her heart surged with hope, only to collapse again. She tried to contact him a few more times. The messages remained unopened. Then one day her texts started bouncing. Number no longer in service. That was the last thread. After that, she stopped trying to reach him. But the absence didn't stop reaching for her. New people came into her life. Colleagues, friends, even the occasional date. But no one held the weight Alex did. No one had the gravity, the quiet confidence that grounded a room without saying a word. Every conversation with someone new was compared to one she'd had with him. Every moment of connection felt like an imitation. And it was then, in her attempt to move forward, that the full cost of what she had lost settled in. Tessa had always thought love was meant to be wild and consuming, full of high highs and chaotic lows. Alex had shown her something different. Love as a quiet presence, steady and loyal, rich in the kind of depth that didn't demand attention. She hadn't recognized it at the time. Now she couldn't stop thinking about it. The man she thought was too predictable had been the one thing she could trust. And when he left, he did it with such certainty, such precision, that it shattered every illusion she had built about herself. For a woman who spent her life chasing shadows, she had finally become the one haunted. Sometimes, late at night, she would whisper his name into the dark, half hoping that the walls might echo it back. They never did. He was gone, not because he hated her, but because he loved himself enough to leave. He had given everything, without asking for applause, and when he saw it wasn't enough, he walked away with grace. Now, Tessa lived with that grace like a scar. Not painful, not fresh, but permanent. She had wanted mystery. And Alex had become the one she could never solve.